So I can guarantee that this will be the least technical talk that you will hear today. No Greek letters, no graphs. Actually, there's one graph, but it's mostly a humorous graph. But really, the reason for this talk is a lot of data science projects within companies don't end up realizing their full potential. They end up on the shelf, not being implemented. And so what I want to talk about today is the reasons for that, is why those things. Because we can do all this great work, but if it doesn't actually get to implementation, to where the company realizes value, we might as well not have even done it at all, right? Because until we implement, it's not actually delivering value for the business. So today I'm going to talk about the different dynamics around how we deliver more effective data science solutions to the organization. So, thank you for the great introduction. Enough about me. I have been with United Health Group for quite a number of years. It's a big company, Fortune 6. So you talk about size, it's 300,000 people. So it's definitely a challenge to get these projects going. So I'm going to use a little analogy. My one graph in the slide. Data science has been around for quite a while now. This tweet is from 2014 by Adrian. Percentage of pie charts that look like Pac-Man. So I don't know if you all know Pac-Man, the video game. It's been around for a long time, but you know, you look at that, it's like, oh, hey, you know, definitely a misuse of data science, right? Just comical, but it's kind of interesting. But data science kind of permeates Pac-Man. Here's another one. Somebody used the Pac-Man image for a data science challenge. It kind of permeates. So you know, what I'm going to talk about is, you know, what are the common challenges that are preventing these projects from really realizing their full potential? The roles required for these successful projects and the strategies for delivering solutions. So just briefly this morning, Jeff, in the keynote, talked about a role called analytics translator. I'm not sure if any of you picked up on that. You mentioned it just briefly. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about today, is that role of the analytics translator. It's not the data scientist. It's more of a business-facing role. Generally, they're product managers, project managers, program managers for business solutions that leverage data science across many different departments. So, what are the challenges they need to solve for? So, there are ghosts in the system. Like in the Pac-Man game. First ghost is, are we asking the right questions? Are we solving the right problems? Okay? Oftentimes not. So there was some Harvard Business research done. This one was published in 2017, a few years ago. Coincidentally, it's about the time that analytics translator role started getting discussed, was 2017. They had this slow elevator problem. And actually this dates back several decades, predates data science, data analytics. But people were complaining about elevators are slow in the building. So the engineers were looking at, well, how can we speed up these elevators? How can we get them moving faster? Because everybody's complaining about the slow elevators. Well, when they actually dug into the problem and kind of peeled back the question, they realized the problem wasn't slow elevators. The problem was people were bored waiting for the elevators. So what did they do? Gave them music, gave them mirrors, gave them something to do. And nowadays, because of these things, smartphones, nobody complains about slow elevators anymore. Or there's much less complaints about slow elevators because there's a distraction. So, you know, if they would have just dived right in and tried to speed up the elevators, reprogram the software, replace the elevators, they wouldn't have solved the problem. People would have still complained about the slow elevator because they wasn't attacking the right problem. So this is what we're dealing with in data science. Next problem, our data challenges, right? Do we have the right data to solve the problem that we're trying to solve for? And that can manifest itself in a number of different places. Is the data fit for purpose? You know, so is the data set that we have that we're trying to solve for actually in a state where we can actually get going? So, I wonder, did I get started early? Now we're good? All right. Yeah, so we got a number of data challenges. One of them I want to highlight here, which is really key to data science, is this one right here of temporal consistency. Now what does that mean? Temporal consistency means that the past and the future look similar. So the future is going to look like the past. So in order for all these algorithms to work in data science, the historical data has to bear some resemblance to the future. So, has anybody ever read like a stock market prospective portfolio? What's the first thing they say? Future returns will not or past returns are not necessarily indicative of future future returns, right? They don't, because the stock market isn't predictable. You can't take the past data and say with any degree of accuracy if tomorrow the market's going to go up or down. It's a random walk. There's a lot of randomness to it. And similarly with data science data sources, if the data source that you're using to predict some type of solution isn't consistent, so it's very dynamic, you have to be, it's not that you can't use it, but you have to be very cognizant of that factor within the data source. Data sufficiency, do we actually have the right data to solve the problem? A lot of times the problem we're trying to solve for, we just don't have the data to solve that problem. And it looks like everybody who came in, I'm going to back up just a second so everybody kind of knows what we're talking about here. So least technical talk of the day, if you heard Jeff talk about the analytics translator role this morning, that's what we're talking about, is the role that is not the data science role, but it's a role of a business leader within the organization who needs to deliver value on the data science project. So that's what we're actually talking about today. And then finally, your unbiased data. So there's a big problem right now in data science on biased data. So there's a lot of companies that have gotten in the news because they developed data science algorithms that had bias in them. And you've probably read about a few of them, very big companies, very well publicized. If you just do some searches, you'll find the news stories about these big companies making mistakes in data science because they didn't factor, they weren't considering bias in the data. So those are another set of challenges that you need to really watch out for when you do these data science projects, because getting tripped up on any of those, and I kind of glossed over data quality, but that's another big one as well, making sure that the data that you have is well representative of the information of the problem you're trying to solve. So, okay. On to the next challenge. So, organizations historically are like to think in absolutes, okay? Especially big organizations. They think in if then else. So they think if we do this, then that happens, or something else may happen. So the whole organizational structure is used to thinking about things in a very rules-based, logic-based decision-making framework. Okay? Data science models, as you know, are very different than that. They're based on probabilistic outcomes. So you're going to have a rank order of outcomes potentially, and you're going to have different values associated with different individual units. So when a individual, say a person, gets a score, like the probability to purchase, that's a probability, it's not a certainty. So we're just making an estimation on the likelihood of their purchase. We're not actually knowing for certain that that person is going to purchase, right? And that's harder for an organization to actually incorporate into their decision-making framework. Because what do I do with the information of, okay, this person's 90% likely to purchase and this person's 70% likely to purchase? Do I contact that person who's 70% likely to purchase? Do I contact both of them? Do I just go after the one that's 90% likely to purchase? It's a very different paradigm for organizations to think this way. And depending on the individual group within the organization, some are more comfortable than others. So it's something that you have to be aware of as you're navigating through the solutions. So next problem. This is a big one, and this is missing the system's perspective. So this is thinking about the problem not just from the data science standpoint, but thinking about what happens before it, what happens after it, what are all the different constraints that are impacting the solution. So there are things that you may know about, the things you may not know about. Unintended consequences, so things that will kind of gum up the works once the model is deployed. So here's a little interesting cartoon. I'm not sure if you can actually see it. The podium might be blocking it. But it says, this guy, he's typing out his email, and everybody's familiar with autocomplete. So he's typing out, long live the revolution. Our next meeting will be at, and then it autocompletes for him. The docs at midnight on June 28th. It's like, I found where the revolution is. The system actually told him what he was looking for before he knew it. So little bit comical there, but this one's focusing on that your system may leak out information unintentionally. So if you're doing autocompletes, and depending on how you're deploying that, it could be good and it could be bad. You don't necessarily know until you test it out and try and figure out, okay, is there actually a something behind this that you need to be concerned about? So, okay, so these are just some of the problems. So what I talked about is the analytics translator role, and within United Health Group we call it the analytics catalyst role, but it's very similar. It's different synonyms for the same thing. Really what it's talking about is we kind of talked about some of the right-hand things here, defining the problem appropriately, identifying issues, scoping the data, prioritizing. So we kind of talked about the right-hand side. Now there's a whole nother component to that, and that's the left-hand side, which is kind of realizing what we're trying to solve for, making sure that we know who the decision makers are within the organization, and what they're trying to solve for with that decision, what success looks like. So oftentimes data science teams come to me and say, hey, I'm not sure where to go with this problem. We've built this model. The business doesn't like it. They keep coming back and saying, we want to see it differently, and we've redone it 3 times, and we still can't get it implemented. And the first thing I say is, do we know what success looks like? And then we kind of have a little silent pause, just like this, and they think about it. Say, no, we don't know what success looks like. Okay? All right, next conversation with the business stakeholders. What does success look like? We need to define that. All right? Because without defining that, ideally that should be defined right up here. When we're defining the problem, we should define what success looks like. But it's never too late. So if we get all the way around here, where we're trying to implement, and we still don't know what success looks like, we should define it. Because it will give us a better outcome. So it's never too late to kind of back up and get into that state. So, can't overemphasize the communication aspects of this. So, data science is a very numbers-driven thing. And I didn't realize this till well on into my career. I've been doing the data, operated in a data science roles throughout my career. Very early on, focused on a lot of the technical aspects, the math and science and computer science aspects of it, and realized that doesn't get you a complete solution. Talking with the business stakeholders and engaging with them, that's as important as the math and the stats behind the solutions. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you, as an individual data scientist, have to take on that role. In a small organization, you might have to. Because if you don't have a translator and you're a team of 1 or 2 data scientists in an organization, you may have to take on this role. If you're in an organization of 300,000 like I am, you can have dedicated translators on teams and have a specific person with that function. And different companies are implementing this. I know companies like Lowe's, the home improvement store, they were just hiring for a specific analytics translator role. I know John Deere, the equipment manufacturer, they have several people in their organization who have these roles. So companies are starting to realize that, hey, this is an important function. And in order to deliver successfully in data science, we need to have these functions. Okay. So, what are the skills that analytics translators need to have? So really, it's a desire to ask the question, to dig deeper. One of my mentors early on, he used to say, what's the question behind the question? right? So digging deeper, what is it we're really trying to solve for? Because oftentimes the first question that gets asked isn't the one that you ultimately solve for. The first question is just kind of a conversation starter. Kind of like asking about the weather, right? You know, when you first start a conversation, kind of start with small talk. Oftentimes that's how these data science problems start in business. They start with, well, I want to know a little bit about how we increase our employee retention. But you know, maybe it might be more about employee satisfaction, because satisfaction is really a driver of retention. So you really have to dig deeper. You can start to model retention, but it's like, well, what do we do about it? You know, so then you have to go back and dig deeper and say, well, it's really about satisfaction, employee engagement is the drivers behind retention. So you have to keep digging deeper and finding out what are the real issues behind the data. Confidence to challenge the perspectives within the business. So there's a lot of teams in the business there they don't understand data science. They're like, it's this magical box. Bring forth some of this magical data science and solve my problems. And so there's an educational aspect of this to really get them to think differently about how they're trying to solve their problem. And really, it's just a passion to share that knowledge. So I mentioned sharing. It's an educational. There's a lot of educational aspect to this role. So. And see, we're moving along quite quickly here. So if you have questions, we're definitely gonna have time at the end here for Q&A. So if there's anything that's not clear as I'm going along, definitely stop and ask. So what else do the translator role need? So solid understanding of the business. So the data scientist is going to know the math and the stat. Okay. The translator needs to know the business domain. So you've probably all seen kind of the three interlocking rings of data science. You got the math, you got the computer science, you got the business domain knowledge. The translator is the person who has to have that deep business domain knowledge. So that's a requirement. And they have to have sufficient knowledge of analytics to function appropriately. So they have to be good conversation, having a good interaction, good rapport with the data science teams. And really, it's looking for creating a really robust solution within the organization. So, what do you need to know about this? One of the critical aspect of this is systems thinking. So, how many of you have heard about systems thinking? A couple. Okay. So not many. So. As data scientists, I encourage you to go out and at least do a little research on systems thinking. It's kind of blocked down here at the bottom of the podium, but there's this website called thesystemsthinker.com. is a really good one. Or just Google on systems thinking, and it'll bring up a number of sources like that. And this example here is a really simple one. It's talking about a marketing promotion. So if you step through this, it looks very linear. So if sales are down, we need more marketing promotions, which will increase orders. Sales are up. But wait a minute, then we have a backlog and sales are down, we need more marketing promotions. So if you look at this at a linear, it doesn't give you the whole picture of what's happened. You need to actually draw the diagram and say, hey, if sales are down, we need to do marketing promotions, that'll increase orders. But if we don't have the capacity in the organization to fulfill those orders, it's going to result in backlogs, and the marketing promotions could actually have a worse impact on the organization than if we didn't do them at all. So there's all these dynamics within the system that need to be mapped out, because if you create a data science a project to say, okay, let's determine who our best prospects are for our customers, create a recommender system for them so that they increase their orders. You could do that, but on the fulfillment side, if the operations of the organization doesn't have the capacity to take on those additional orders, what's going to happen? Unsatisfied customers, they may leave and shop someplace else. This happened at Target, it happened at Amazon. I think most of the big retailers have happened at one point or another where they didn't have adequate capacity in their system, especially on like a Black Friday, and they lose sales because hey, put out this big promotion, and the analysis says, hey, this is what we should do. It's the big shopping day of the year. but they didn't think about all the components that they need to actually fulfill that entire process. So that's a key component. The other key component is measuring success. So again, this is a very iterative approach, is setting the goalpost within the business. So understanding, what success looks like, I mentioned that before. What baseline are you starting from? Oftentimes businesses don't know what their starting point actually is. So if you don't know where you're starting from, how do you know when you actually implemented a good solution? And I see this time and time again that they want to jump to a very complicated solution, but they don't even understand some basic key metrics about their customer. And without understanding those key metrics, it becomes very difficult to actually measure the success of the solution. So it's established all those metrics and these feedback loops at the beginning of the process, if possible. But again, it's never too late. If you're in the middle of a project, it's still not too late to think about these things. Change management is another key aspect of this. So like I said, businesses aren't used to thinking in terms of data science models, or at least not universally through the business. Different departments are better than others. Some are more well-versed. But when it comes to actually implementing the solution, ask the business, what is it really going to, are all the pieces in line to have a good solution? Oftentimes they're not. So, and ultimately, we want to have some type of dashboard solution out there. So, the solution isn't complete until you can actually measure its success or not. So the process doesn't start with a finished model, or the process doesn't end with a finished model. That's just the starting point. Okay. So if you want to kind of look at it on one slide, traditionally data science operates in the center circle. So you try experiments, you learn from the experiments, you build the model, and then you may measure whether or not the model is working or not. But there's a whole ramp up on the left-hand side there, which is the ideation standpoint. And that's in the business what they call design thinking. So it's what's the business problem, how do we define that, is it defined properly? Are we really thinking about all of the different constituencies involved? The customer, the business, all different stakeholders. So there's this whole ramp-up side where, because how many times have you been involved in a project where it's like, who just threw this over the fence at me? I don't know where this came from. Who thought of this? It doesn't make any sense, right? I see a lot of people smiling, yeah. Because you missed the whole ideation stage. Nobody invited you to the meeting. I don't know how many times I've been in data science groups. I'm like, why didn't they invite us when they were talking about this right at the start, right? Because now they're like, okay, build us this model and build it in 2 weeks. And it's like, well, what are we building? What are we trying to solve for? And hey, let's time out. Let's take a pause and see, are we solving the right problem before we start going into these iterations of model building. And then, even though once you got the model built, so you've got a great model, still not done, because now you have to implement it into the operations of the business. Okay, and this is called industrialization, or it's the whole Agile process. So you're not going to go into everything about Agile, but not Agile in flexibility, but Agile in software development. You've got a whole software development process that has to happen here on the back end, which is the product backlog, sprint planning, shippable increments, sprint review. So if you haven't heard of the Agile process within software engineering, that's a good thing too to kind of review and get some background on, because ultimately this is where a lot of the ghosts are uncovered in the system, if you will, if we're using the Pac-Man analogy. Things start to go wrong out here when they try and implement into the system. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden, it's not going to fly. So, okay, that's what I have. And you might not be able to see the quote at the bottom here, but it's from Peter Drucker. And it says, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Okay. So it's not, the math and the science behind this is all important, but don't forget about the whole other side of the equation, which is all the dynamics within the organization, within the business, that's going to be required, all those conversations will be required to deliver a successful solution. So, Questions? Yep.
Have you been involved in a few or many Agile projects?
Quite a few, yes.
Okay. Do you think that it has increased the employee productivity?
Productivity? That's a good question. I would say generally yes, because of what it replaced. So Agile generally replaced waterfall, which waterfall was, let's plan this whole big thing up front and make sure we got everything specified out down to every possible consideration to develop out the entire solution. Well, especially in the data science realm, you don't know everything up front. So if you try and specify out everything on the front end of what a model is going to look like in the back end, you don't know what variables are going to be significant going into a model at the front end. You try and specify that out, you're going to run into challenges. So I think Agile is much more aligned to how analytics functions, so it is much more productive. Now in certain situations, if you're building out like a massive build, a different framework might be better. But I think in general, Agile is better. Any other questions? Okay, well hopefully you found this valuable, and that there's more to data science than just the math and the stat behind it. So, yep.
I do have one question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
So being analytics translator, it's something that kind of really sounds neat to me. Are there any books or anything you'd recommend to for someone who's interested in that field?
Sure. So actually, I would recommend the Coursera course, if you're familiar with Coursera. So Andrew Ng, who a number of you know, very famous data scientist, just developed a course called AI for Everyone. Okay, and that course, it's a fairly short course. You can get through it in a few weeks. It's just like a few hours. So a series of videos that goes deeper into this topic. So I would recommend that course.
Thank you.
Yeah. And let's see. Okay, are we at time or?
Do you have a few more minutes?
A few more minutes? Okay. I'm not sure if the audio is going to work in this room. Oh, this isn't my computer. That's right, so that's not going to work. So I had a little video clip from a company called Go Data Driven. They're based out of Sweden, I think, or Netherlands? Netherlands, I think. And actually, if we do have a few minutes, I think my laptop is up here. Let's just run it. Oh, you're not gonna be able to see it very good. Okay. Anyway, it's when I teach a class on this, I have an hour, so I have a little bit more time to run through that. But what we're doing at United Health Group is we're actually teaching classes on this right now, and talking with the different business stakeholders. So the audience for this, like I was saying, is product managers, project managers, program managers for the business. So they're the individuals that are responsible for delivering solutions out to the business, and these solutions have data science components to them. Now, traditionally, project managers aren't versed in data science. So the audience for this training that I put together is those program manager type roles who need to understand how these data science functions work and how to interact with them so they can deliver the value. So we've just started that this year, so it's still kind of evolving within the organization, but we're finding that it's a key capability that we need to have, especially in a big organization.
So for a data analytics translator, would you recommend learning more business side of things or more communication side of things?
I think you need a blend of both. Yeah, I don't think you can focus on just one or the other. And one slide I didn't have in here that I took out, maybe should have kept. It's what they call a T-shaped role. So you have to have a fairly broad base of knowledge. So you have to have both the communication, you have to have the business knowledge. So you can't just focus on one area. So
I was going to say, do you see the analytics translator role being needed in the future as more education requirements are, like you see more education around data analytics, more people are well versed in it? In the long-term future, do you see analytics translator maybe getting weeded out or no?
I don't think it's going to get weeded out. I think it's going to get more important.
Okay.
So in education, there's kind of been this pendulum swing where, like right now, the liberal arts are being very marginalized. So if the English majors, the political science majors, they're kind of marginalized, and the focus is swinging towards the technical majors. So the computer science, the math, stat, and they're getting the attention right now, right? And and initially I thought, great, awesome, we're going to have all these data scientists. But in working with companies, I'm finding out like, that's not giving us the full picture. We're not getting all the different perspectives. Because oftentimes we need these design experts to create a good customer experience. Because oftentimes you may create the best model, but if the interface, how many of you have worked with computer software the interface is crappy? Yeah, almost everybody's hand goes up, right? Why is that? Well, the engineers built the software for it. They never talked to somebody who actually would use it. And when they put the product out there, it looks like crap, right? That was because they weren't doing design thinking, right? They weren't thinking about the end in mind, what the actual experience of the consumer is going to be. So I think there needs to be a diversity of perspectives. And one of the things that United Health Group is doing right now is making sure that we have diversity of perspective across all teams. And diversity includes not just the standard demographic diversity, but it also includes diversity of thinking. So you have a technical thinker with a creative thinker who has artistic ability. I didn't go into it here, but so much of successfully communicating this to the business is visualizing. So I didn't have a lot of visuals in here, but you'll come to understand that within a data science team, a software product like Tableau or Click or something like that that's good at data visualization, you have to have that in order to tell your value story. So this is all about storytelling. Is a lot of this is making sure that you can distill down the facts of what you're trying to present to somebody with non-technical knowledge, because the majority of your business leaders are not going to be technical leaders. There's some exceptions, there's I think some of the CEOs of like Microsoft or IBM or something like that. You have PhDs in mathematics, but that's the exception to the rule. Most business leaders aren't thinking in Greek letters. Okay, I can guarantee you they don't think in Greek letters. And there's nothing against talking about that in our close community of analytics specialists. We can talk in Greek letters. But when we want to communicate the value out to the business leaders, we've got to translate that into their language, because we can't expect them to understand the technical components of it. So, yeah.
I just want to piggyback on what you say, because I'm a little older than a lot of you students here. And yeah, I thought 20 years ago that I was kind of this niche where, eventually everybody would become computer savvy and they wouldn't need me anymore. Well, it's been 20 years, and there are still a lot of people who just will never become computer savvy or technical savvy or mathematics savvy. So there's always that need for the go-between.
Yeah, and I can't imagine a project today for a engineering perspective, like programming, that doesn't have a business analyst on it. I picture this role as a business analyst for data science, right? And I think every project will have one.
Yeah.
Guaranteed in the future. They won't be able to do it without it.
Yeah, thank you. A business analyst is another role that we target. Yep. So, all right. I just saw we were in the last minute slide. So, any last question, or otherwise we can head. It's a walk back to the break room. So it'll take us a couple minutes to get back there. So, thank you, everybody.